Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kaylee Ogden. I'm a writer, and I am the Vampire Girl. Today, I swear, I did not plan this video to end up being posted this weekend. It was complete happenstance. But we're talking about religion on Easter weekend. So that's funny. Vampires have existed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they exist all around the world. Vampires have been tied to religion since the beginning. Vampires or vampire-like beings permeate every culture in the world. Today, we're only going to be focusing on Christianity, since that is what I personally am the most familiar with, and since that's one of the biggest representations in the vampire genre. But rest assured, I will get to all of the other representations and religions down the line. Today, we're just going to talk about Christianity. This video also contains mild spoilers for these titles. Alrighty, let's hop into it. Hop. Easter bunny. Bunnies hop. Hop into the it's Easter. Anyway, ignore me. Let's go. What even is a vampire? Webster's dictionary defines it as a blood-sucking ghost or reanimated body of a dead person believed to come from the grave and wander about by night, sucking the blood of persons asleep and causing their death. Vampires are creatures who are not held by death. In fact, they kind of have a hand over it. Vampires are born of death, and they are meant to spread it. Different mythologies have different ways of becoming a vampire. These include being born out of wedlock, being the seventh son born, being bitten, of course, being buried without the proper rites being performed, committing suicide, or being murdered or dying with a restless spirit. Other people believe that the vampire is just a demonic being who takes the form of something human in order to spread its yuck through the land. Land of yuck. These creatures are beings of the devil, and they serve his purposes. In other variations of the legend, there is a distinction made between a living vampire and a dead vampire. Aren't all vampires dead, you may ask? Not according to these people. This is the reason that Mina Harker in Dracula is able to be saved, whereas her friend Lucy was not, because Lucy died and Mina didn't. Mina was therefore a living vampire. In the book I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, there is also a distinction made between living and dead vampires based on their reactions to certain stimuli, sunlight, garlic, etc. There is just so much that goes with the vampire myth, and I would not be able to cover it all in one video, so we're gonna leave it here for now, and then we're going to dive into the religious part of it. Okay? Cool. Let's go. The vampire legend began in Slavic countries in the 16th century. The people believed that there was a constant struggle between the forces of good and the forces of evil, vampires being in the latter category. The people had different practices and customs in order to protect themselves from vampires, and in order to dispatch any vampires that they suspected of roaming around. When different sects of Christianity moved into Europe and England, the narrative changed. They started seeing the pagans themselves as vampires. I mean, they were the ones that were making blood sacrifices to these other deities. They also saw the Jewish people as vampires due to the blood used in the Passover. When Mormon missionaries started to appear in England in the 1800s, even they were considered vampires. I mean, they were these mysterious travelers who came into their land and stole their women to go across the sea. Everybody's a vampire in this day and age. There's just everybody. There was an intense fear of the outsider and the unknown. Anything that disrupted the perfect uniformity of the Christian world at that time period was seen as foreign and of the devil and bad. It's understandable why Christians would have such a fierce fear of vampires. They stand in antithesis to everything the religion believes. Christians believe that Christ died on the cross and was resurrected after 3 days on account of him being the Son of God and his divine power. Vampires also raise from the grave, but their power is one of dark and of malice. Christ invited his followers to eat of his body and drink of his blood. Vampires solely feed on human blood, thereby bastardizing the Last Supper and the sacrament. Christ taught that the blood is the life, and the consumption or the theft of life is essentially against God. That's why mortals are never meant to partake of human blood. Blood is life, life is of God, and if you take the blood from someone or something else, you are essentially saying that you are now God and that life belongs to you, which is not okay. Don't do that. No. With vampires being such an antithesis to Christ and the Christian faith, it only follows that the icons and the symbols of that church and of that being be the things that repel vampires. This being the cross, holy water, the holy wafer, the church, a priest, the Bible. If it's holy, vampires aren't gonna like it. Here are a couple of examples of Christian iconography used in order to dispel vampires. There's a really interesting example in the Astro City comic. The Confessor is a vampire who, while in his super costume, wears a cross on the front of it. Now this keeps him in constant pain, and it keeps him from the desire to feed. Another really cool example comes from the manga Rosario Vampire. Rosario plus vampire, Rosario cross vampire, Rosario vampire. In this manga, the main female is Mocha. Mocha, when we first meet her, seems to be this very sweet and bubbly girl. She's very pretty. She is super into our main character. We love Mocha. She is also a vampire that wears a cross around her neck. This is to keep her inner vampire self in check. And once the cross is removed, this girl turns from sweet and bubbly to a total badass female killer. We love Vampire Mocha. We stan Vampire Mocha. This is a really cool instance of the thing that is usually used to repel vampires, used to repress that inner power that Mocha has. Another example comes from one of my favorite manga series, Bloody Mary. In this, the main character, Ichiro, is an exorcist. He is descended from a long line of exorcists, and his job is to destroy the vampires, exorcise them, get them out of the city. Only he doesn't have the same power that his predecessors has. He's floundering, is the best way to put it. But that power still exists in his bloodline, and it's there. He just needs to find a way to unlock it. So Bloody Mary, so good. Go check it out. I have the first 4 volumes. They're so good. Trust me. I love Ichiro. Some authors also take Judas Iscariot, the person who betrayed Christ in the Bible, and they turn him into the first vampire. Either all vampires who walk the earth currently were born of his blood, or when he tried to kill himself after betraying Christ, he was cursed by God to walk the earth forever. So in that vein, Judas Iscariot himself is the first vampire, which I think is a really interesting look at the myth and how it translates into Christianity. I won't delve too deeply into that specific area just yet, but some of the movies and books that we're going to look at as a tie-in to this video will deal with that. But what about the eternal conundrum? Can you hold a cross to a Jewish vampire and expect it to work? Well, let's answer that question. In fact, it delves into one of my favorite literary tropes, faith-based magic. I love the concept of faith-based magic. It's one of my favorite literary devices. It's also becoming really popular in a lot of media, especially surrounding demons and vampires. In these stories, it's not so much the symbol itself that holds the power, it's the person wielding it. In Salem's Lot, Father Calhoun tries to use a cross against Kurt Barlow, the vampire. Because Father Calhoun's faith was not as strong as it needed to be, the weapons were ineffective. In Book 3 of the Dresden Files, Grave Peril, we're introduced to Michael. Michael is a knight of God, and he is fantastic and adorable, and we love him, and Michael, I love him. Michael's power directly stems from his faith in God. It literally fuels the sword that he wields. And when somebody without that faith tries to wield the same sword, it loses all power. It's not good. It's actually really bad. Go read the Dresden Files. Total side note, great urban fantasy series. We'll cover it sometime in the future. Go check out the Dresden Files, please. It's so good. It's also really fun in that book to see Michael's intense faith in the higher authority paired with Harry's more lax, I know it exists, but it's never done anything for me kind of attitude. The two are great opposites, and it's a great dynamic to see what works for Michael that doesn't work for Harry. Another example of faith-based magic comes in the 2011 version of Fright Night. Charlie Brewster tries and fails to use a cross to repel Jerry. In fact, Jerry mocks him for it and even lights the cross on fire. He mocks Charlie for not having the faith needed to make the cross work. Later though, when Amy is fighting Jerry, she grabs a goblet full of holy water and splashes him in the face with it, and it works. It's a very fast moment, but we do see that Amy has full confidence that this will work. Her faith is not shaky. In fact, she's kind of smug about it because she knows that it'll work. And it's a fantastic moment. Go Amy, girl power, take him down. But what about a Jewish vampire? Will the cross work? Let's look at I Am Legend again. Robert Neville, the main character of the book, asks himself the same question. So he just goes out and gets himself a Jewish vampire. Gets kidnapped, the same thing. Neville first tries to use a cross and see what effect that has on the vampire. It doesn't. But when he holds a Star of David up to the vampire, he shrinks away and cries out. In this instant, it's not Neville's faith that gives the symbol power, it's the vampire's. The vampire's Jewish faith lends to his repulsion from the Star of David. Now, I Am Legend is a more scientifically based book, but the psychological aspect of faith is something that I have always found incredibly fascinating. In this case, the vampire is repelled by the symbol simply because it knows that it should. It knows that it should not want to look upon this symbol of their god. Whether or not that symbol has the power of God itself is irrelevant because the vampire believes that it does. So, what's the definitive answer? Are vampires purely repelled by Christian things because Christians are the ones writing the books? Are they repelled because the person wielding the cross has faith? Are they repelled because they are the ones that have faith? Are they repelled because God is omnipotent and he is everywhere in everything? I don't have the answer. I mean, of course I have my own personal beliefs and I have my own personal writing style when I write vampires. In all actuality, it's completely up to the creator. Whoever's writing these stories and these movies can do whatever they want. There is so much incredible things that you can do with vampire content. If you are a person of faith, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, pagan, vampires come in all shapes and sizes, and they can fit anywhere and any way you want them to fit. In different iterations, the church can be a good symbol, it can be bad, it can be the heroes, they can be the villains, the vampires can be the heroes, they can be the villains, they can be demons, they can be bodiless, they can be anything. That's what's so incredible about the vampire myth. It is in everything. It's in every genre, it's in every faith, it's in every culture. It is universal. And I love it. I hope you guys will stick with me as we look at a couple of really good examples of vampires in the Christian myth in the next coming weeks. So until next time, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Bye guys!